It's week 6, and we're giving you our updated rest of season rankings for the top 24 running backs here in fantasy football. We're joined by Jagger May. You can always check out his work on the Sunday morning live show, and Jagger does a bunch of behind the scenes work for us. So it's good to have him here on camera with Dave and I. Gentlemen, let's just jump right into this. Looking at the running backs, I don't think there's any question about who the top running back is. It's Christian McCaffrey. We all have him as the number one. But then when we look at this tier, okay, this is our top 3 running backs, all in the top tier. Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, Austin Ekeler. There's a little bit of, dissension, but for the most part, all 3 of these guys are in this tier. Jagger, I'm going to throw this to you as our guest today. Are we worried that maybe for any reason Bijan Robinson could get Arthur Smith here? He's definitely getting the least amount of touches of all these running backs. Is there a possibility we don't see him finish as a top 3 running back this year?
I mean, the possibility is always there for Arthur Smith, but I don't think we can possibly keep him out of our top 3. Like, again, if you look at a lot of their peripherals, specifically like the missed tackles, the dude, even with the limited touches, he's doing the most with them. So there comes a point where I think that Bijan Robinson might be the only thing on this offense works if Desmond Ritter's good week is just a fluke. So to me, it's especially how decimated running back is. We were just talking before the show about IR City. Everyone's at. Who else would you rather put there and feel like that they're going to produce at a high level every week? It's obviously Bijan.
Yeah, and he is such a weapon in the passing game too. We talk about how targets are worth 2.5 times as much as a carry, and right now, if you look at his weighted opportunities, he's 17th in touches, but he's 7th in weighted opportunities. He's number 1 in receptions. I mean, this man is hands like glue. Even 7th in targets, he's still first in receptions. He catches everything that comes his way. He's so efficient when he gets the ball in his hand. But yeah, I think he's pretty clear cut the RB2.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you have him clear-cut RB2. Taking a look at it here. Yeah, you and Jagger both have Bijan as RB2. I'm still sticking with Austin Ekeler at RB3. I think there's a little bit of the recency bias there. And once he gets back, that's a really good offense. But either way, these are the top 3 running backs. I don't think you're going to find anyone questioning that. But I will say this. I want more of those really cool Bijan Robinson highlights where the Atlanta Falcons keep showing them from up above, like the top angle coming out of, I don't know what that, where is that coming from? Is that like a drone? Is that the scoreboard? Like, what is this? Is that the camera that's on a
camera
wire?
Like attached to the roof, maybe? I don't know really.
It's a drone from the top angle, and then you use Adobe After Effects to key in on specifically the ball.
On the football,
and then it'll only stay on that angle the whole time. So
look at this guy. That's why we bring you on. Not even for fantasy football stuff. Just it's all camera content here for the next 30 minutes. Well, if you're enjoying this talk about these running backs and camera talk and content, whatever, give this video a quick like, give it a thumbs up, and then drop your running back and fantasy football questions for week 6 in the comments below. And as always, make sure you are subscribed to the Footballguys YouTube channel because we're bringing you this show Monday through Thursday. We've got an audio show for you on Friday. We've got a Sunday morning live start sit. And we've got so many other shows like the Audible and the Footballguys Dynasty show, the DFS show. There's so much content here at Footballguys, so make sure you are subscribed. Now, gentlemen, we're going to move on to tier number 2 here for the running backs. And this is where things start to move around a little bit more. There's a little bit more of the dissension here. At number 4, we've got Tony Pollard. I've got him ranked 4. Dave, you're at 7. Jagger, you're at 6. Then we have Travis Etienne as our 5th running back, and we're all pretty close on that one. Here's where things start to get a little weird. So, or at least in my opinion, I want to hear the talk here. You guys both have David Montgomery ranked as your running back 4 for the rest of the season. I'm quite a bit lower. I've got him at running back 12. I still think he is an RB1, but a top 4 running back. I would actually venture to say that you guys are the ones that are way out of left field on this one. We're seeing that all 3 of these running backs we've talked about here, Pollard, Etienne, Montgomery, all 3 of them are getting volume, 20 plus touches per game for all 3 of these guys. David Montgomery, this has been the interesting one, okay? 23 touches per game, 6 rushing touchdowns in 4 games. Last season, we made the assumption here. There's no way he could be Jamal Williams, right? And get 17 touchdowns like he did last year. Jamal Williams finished as the RB15. And David Montgomery out here doing the same thing. He's on pace to score 22 touchdowns this season. That would absolutely shatter last year's touchdown leader, Austin Ekeler. And we actually have not seen an NFL player get that many touchdowns since Randy Moss in 2007. So, gentlemen, I want to hear it from both of you. Why should I be, and why should our audience be as high on David Montgomery going forward? Because RB4 is quite the flag plant on this guy.
Well, you said that there's no way he could be this year's Jamal Williams, and I'll admit he's not. He is better than Jamal Williams. He has the Jamal Williams role, and he is a much better running back. He's my RB4 right now. He's the RB6 in per game scoring, and the guys that are ahead of him are Zach Moss, who is going to be relegated to the bench now that Jonathan Taylor got his deal, and Raheem Mostert, who's 31 years old and heavily inflated with some touchdowns there. Devon Achane is ahead of him, who is injured. Ekeler on a one-game sample size, and then Christian McCaffrey, the RB1. He's a workhorse running back on a great offense behind one of the league's best offensive lines on a team that heavily commits to the run. And you talk about the overall touches, but in per game touches, only Christian McCaffrey, Zach Moss, who, like we said, is now going to be on the bench, and Alvin Kamara, who has a 2-game sample size, have seen more touches per game. I mean, when he is out on the field, when he and Gibbs are both out there, he's the guy. He's getting passing down work. He's getting goal line work. He's getting the between the tackles touches. I mean, he's getting everything right now. So I was very excited about Jahmyr Gibbs in the offseason, but quick to kind of shift my opinion and realize that David Montgomery is very much so the guy in this offense. So yeah, RB4 for the rest of the season. And I mean, you could argue that he might be the RB3 ahead of Ekeler or Bijan, and it wouldn't really be that crazy to me.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
I agree.
Yeah, Jagger, I'm gonna go to you here because like this is, I got to take a breath here. Are we not being slaves to the recency bias? I mean, I get it that he's performed great. He's getting the touchdowns. Jagger, do you think the volume and the touchdowns and everything going on here? I know, Dave, you're talking about running backs that are ranked ahead of him, but do we not think that any other running backs jump ahead of David Montgomery? This wouldn't just be a career year for him. This would be a historic year for a running back in general. No?
To me, it's not recency bias with David Montgomery because it's kind of like what we already alluded to. We've already seen what this role can be. You're not buying David Montgomery. You're buying the Detroit Lions early down running back. Like it's kind of like what we were talking about with Arthur Smith and a little bit how we got DeAndre Swift ranked so highly because we are buying someone who is in a particular system. If you look at the peripherals with David Montgomery, they're not beautiful, but when you look at what he does with his touches with sheer volume, you don't need to overthink it because he's going to get the volume and he's going to get the touchdowns. And if you think about the Detroit Lions, it's not just about David Montgomery getting so many carries. It's about the pace of this offense. They have a soft defense, and clearly every game is going to be like I don't know, the Vegas line 50 points almost every game are going to go up because their defense is soft and they have the offense to keep up with shootouts. It's a no-brainer for me.
See, okay, so this is interesting. I'll say this. I do agree. David Montgomery should be ranked as a running back 1 rest of season.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a case that, I might be too low on him at running back 12, but I simply just can't get behind the running back 4 ranking just yet. I think we're going to talk more about a bunch of these other running backs who I think they have higher ceilings. I think they have very similar floors and volume plays. And that's going to be kind of the theme of this whole episode here, talking about running backs, because that's what it is. Running backs are going to be all about volume. We know that touchdowns can be fluky. I'll just end with this. Last year, Jamal Williams and his 17 touchdowns, running back 15 on the season. As you guys said, Dave Montgomery, better. That's why I've got him at running back 12. We'll see how that goes. Now, before we move on here to our next running back, I want to remind you guys, we've got all of our weekly rankings over at footballguys.com. They're 100% free. They've got Dave, myself, various other Football Guys analysts. We give you custom waiver wire advice, custom start sit advice. All you have to do is become a Football Guys Pro subscriber for $3.99 a month, and you're going to get all that custom advice that is catered to your league, the scoring settings, your roster, everything. Let's move on. Number 7. We've got Breece Hall. I've got him ranked as running back 10. Dave, you're at running back 7. Jagger, you're at running back 6. We saw this past week, Breece Hall with a career high 177 rush yards in week 5. The Denver Broncos, it's a get-right game for every single running back, and it kind of seems like it's putting every running back on a get-right season after that. Breece Hall does have a tough matchup here in week 6, going up against the Eagles. They're allowing the fewest fantasy points to running backs, just 3.1 yards per carry, only 1 touchdown allowed on the season. The Jets did just lose Elijah Vera Tucker, but then there's a really good, juicy stretch of games. The Giants, Chargers, Raiders, Bills, Dolphins. So, guys, let's talk about Breece Hall here. Dave, I want to throw it to you first. You had Breece Hall as your start of the week last week, as a buy candidate as well in our trade targets episode. You've got Breece Hall ranked at running back 7.
Yeah, I think that I think we need to flip this conversation, Alfredo. You're putting the onus on Jagger and I to kind of defend our ranks when you're the odd man out here. I mean, you're the one that's lower on Breece Hall. You're the one that's lower on David Montgomery. I think Jagger and I are the ones that kind of have the consensus, if you will, of the three of us.
You can go ahead. I think public opinion would likely not have David Montgomery at running back 4. And I did put a poll out on Twitter where David Montgomery, the majority had him between running back 6 to 10, and then another 25% had him below that. So I do think that
people are actually doing rankings. Like it's easy to say, yeah, Montgomery feels like a back end RB1. I'm serious. It feels like it's really easy to say like Montgomery feels like a back end RB1, but then like, does Pollard deserve to be ahead of him? Does Travis Etienne deserve to? So I feel like that's where it kind of gets tough. It's you look at David Montgomery and you think back end 1. You actually sit down and do the rankings, and it's kind of tough to put him there. But Breece Hall, you said my RB7. He's actually my RB6. And I think that if he wasn't coming off this ACL tear, he would be in the Christian McCaffrey, Ekeler, Bijan tier. He is that good, and right now he's just kind of defying everything we thought we knew about ACL tears. Last week, we finally saw him come off that snap count, and he logged a season high in snaps, carries, targets, receptions, scrimmage yards. He scored his first touchdown. Over the last 2 weeks, where he's finally starting to look like himself again, averaging 8.3 yards per carry, 2nd in the league in yards per touch, 4th in the league in rushing yards over expectation per attempt. And the crazy thing is he is doing this ahead of schedule, like where he should be limited on a snap count and not looking like himself. He is still crushing every single efficiency metric. He's only going to get better as the season goes on. So right now he's my RB6, but I think by the time we get to the end of the season, week 12, week 13, week 14, we're going to have him in that tier 1 discussion.
Yep.
Thank you, Jagger.
Well, it's like to me, it's what more can I say? Because
I get you.
And another point that I just want to add on, I know this is crazy. Maybe Zach Wilson has gotten better. It was really ugly when he first gotten in there, but like at least the offense looks competent. I'm not saying it looks good. It doesn't look like what Aaron Rodgers. It doesn't look as good as if Aaron Rodgers was a quarterback, but I definitely think they can at least move the ball. And he's the only thing in this offense that I think is truly working as well as what the price that we paid for. Shout out to my sad Garrett Wilson shares.
Well, we all have Breece Hall here at least as a RB1 for the rest of the season. You guys are a bit more on he could be jumping into that tier 1 of running backs. I've got him at running back 10. I don't think that's all that crazy to have him there. He's definitely a top 10 running back at this point. I want to continue to see it. I know he's going to have a tough matchup this week against the Eagles. We see the big blow up performance against the Broncos. Everyone has had a blow up performance against the Broncos. Now, that's a game theory thing, right? Like as a fantasy manager, sometimes it does not pay to wait and see if a player breaks out. Sometimes it pays to be like you guys and be ahead of that curve. So you guys may be right on that one. Let's go to Jonathan Taylor here, running back number 8 on our tier list. And guess what, guys? We all finally agree on something outside of the number 1 running back. Jonathan Taylor, number 8. Listen, week 5 was not great. 6 carries on just 10 snaps. I guess, good usage, right? 60% usage rate while he's out there. You've got Gardner Minshew potentially in here for looks like maybe 6 weeks under center. Zach Moss. This is a weird situation because I think we have to assume he doesn't go away entirely, but Jonathan Taylor just got paid $42 million. At what point do we see Jonathan Taylor just take over, Dave?
I mean, I think that Gardner Minshew being the starting quarterback is better for Jonathan Taylor, because if it was Anthony Richardson, he'd be losing out on some rushing work. He wouldn't get the same amount of checkdowns. He wouldn't be getting the goal line work. So I think that this is good news for Jonathan Taylor. You got to hope. I mean, yeah, it's really fun to have that like 2-headed monster with Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss, but they committed $42 million or something like that. You got to assume that they're going to put him in a featured role. So there's some running back hungry teams out there, and you got to wonder if Indianapolis is going to start dangling Zach Moss out there. I mean, he has been crushing it. Not just, we've talked about this a lot. It hasn't just been kind of volume dependent and volume based. He's been very efficient with the touches that he's been getting. But overall, Jonathan Taylor, I mean, he's Jonathan Taylor. If anybody's panicking over last week's usage, I am absolutely buying. But I think anybody that held on to him for the first 4 weeks, and even if they got burned last week with him in their starting lineup, they know what they've got in Jonathan Taylor. That's why they drafted him. I think, yeah, looking at him, I think we're all very measured and level-headed in our RB8 ranking of Jonathan Taylor.
Okay, not too much to talk about there. I think it's just going to be a matter of time before Jonathan Taylor really takes over in this backfield. I do want to move on to our running back number 9 here, okay? And that is Ken Walker III, running back for the Seattle Seahawks. And so I want to make this just a kind of a conversational point. Both you and Jagger have Walker ranked as the running back 10. Both you and Jagger have David Montgomery ranked as running back 4. And we've done a ton of David Montgomery talk, so I don't want to jump into that. But I kind of want to play both sides of this here and see why, because there's a lot of love for David Montgomery despite Jahmyr Gibbs being there. And, the passing offense, and there's still receivers that command targets in that offense. Where does the fear stem from with Walker, or at least the apprehension with Walker? Is it because there's a rookie running back like Zach Charbonnet waiting in the wings? Jagger, I want to throw this to you first.
Yes, that's what it is for me. And I definitely think that a lot of his production is coming from touchdowns. And I don't think that's just, this isn't so much about Kenneth Walker or even Zach Charbonnet. I just don't think that the Seahawks are very good this year. And I don't know how sustainable that Kenneth Walker is going to be long term if he can't continually get these long runs, that like these explosive runs. That's where he's getting his bread and butter. And that's honestly, this was kind of a scared ranking for me, because to be honest, this was the range where I struggled where to put running backs, because there's guys that are clearly talented. Because to be honest, Kenneth Walker has outperformed where I've had him ranked preseason, because broken tackles for attempt, he's top 5. Broken tackles, he is number 3. Missed tackles per attempt, he's number 2. So he's playing well when he's on there. I just don't think Seattle is as great as an offense as they were last year, and he could continue to get these massive pop games with touchdowns.
Yeah, and on top of that, I mean, David Montgomery in the games where he's been healthy, he's a 75 to 80% snap share guy. Kenneth Walker is a 60% snap share guy. So not only is the Detroit offense better, but David Montgomery has a bigger slice of that better offense. And then when you look, they're both trending in opposite directions in the passing game. Week 1, David Montgomery saw 0 targets. Week 2, he saw 1 target. His third game, he saw 2 targets. And then last week, he saw 6 targets. Compare that to Kenneth Walker, who saw 5 targets in week 1, dropped down to 2, then 3, and then wasn't involved in the passing game at all last week. So he's trending in a downward way as Zach Charbonnet is carving out a bigger role. Well, Jahmyr Gibbs hasn't really done anything to expand his role.
Well,
and David
Jahmyr Gibbs didn't play last
growth.
week. Jahmyr Gibbs didn't play last week. That's why the David Montgomery passing role grows. I'm gonna fight back a little bit, okay? Because we're talking about because we're talking about how the touchdowns are not sustainable for Ken Walker, but somehow they're sustainable for David Montgomery. The long runs shouldn't be sustainable for Ken Walker, but the long runs are sustainable for Breece Hall. I'm gonna fight for the Ken Walker truthers out there, okay? I think that all these running backs
I get it.
Well, 2 years. He's been in the league for a year and a half. But I don't know what else Walker has to do to be considered a top 9 running back amongst you guys. I think that he's still been playing just fine. But I do get it. I want to bring up as many of these, I don't want to call them arguments, but as many talking points as possible to make sure, our audience is getting all sides of it, right? This is not a Ken Walker love fest or hate fest, but, we're seeing both sides of it here.
To me, this is 3 sides right here, because you're incredibly bullish. Dave is a hater. I think I met on him again, because I said that like Kenneth Walker is good and much better than what I thought. It is Seattle. So like, this is great content, folks.
How can you say I'm a hater when we've got him ranked exactly the same, Jagger? We both got him as RB10.
Your comments that I'm going to clip.
Well, Jagger, you got one thing right. It's great content. All right, boys, let's move on to tier number 3 here, where a lot of familiar names, guys that I think we all expected to be a bit better. There's going to be quite some talk here. We've got Josh Jacobs as running back 10. And of course, there's some major dissenting opinions here. I'm the one that is buoying Josh Jacobs up, and so much of it is just about volume. 21 touches per game. Unfortunately, he has not yet cracked 70 yards rushing in a game. However, he's been a top 6 fantasy running back in back-to-back weeks. He's got a favorable schedule going forward. Jagger, I'm going to hold off on you because you are lowest on Josh Jacobs here. So Dave, I'll go to you because you're next in line. Do we think that the efficiency gets better for Josh Jacobs, or are we just looking at a guy that may not finish as a top 12 running back on the season despite all this volume?
I mean, he's never been a really efficient running back. Last year, he kind of saw this boom in efficiency, and now this year, we're seeing him trend back to more what we've seen in the beginning of his career. And you can chalk a lot of this up to the O-line. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that offensive line has looked terrible. On top of that, Derek Carr and his ability to push the ball downfield would kind of open up the defense a little bit. Jimmy Garoppolo, with no threat of a deep game, has really just caused defenses to cheat up and play a little bit tighter. So he's seen a lot of stacked fronts with a bad offensive line, makes for a fantasy nightmare. But Josh Jacobs isn't doing himself any favors either. Negative 48 rushing yards over expectation on the year is the 7th worst in the league. The volume is there, but I mean, I think that we've got him kind of where he should be ranked as a volume-dependent touchdown or bust RB2. Like if he's not getting in the end zone and he's not all that involved in the passing game, I mean, a little bit, but you know, he's not a pass-catching machine like we saw last year. That's where my concern comes from. You know, he doesn't have a lot to really inflate his floor. So you're kind of hoping that he falls into the end zone. And if he doesn't, you're kind of looking at back end RB2 work every week.
Now, Josh Jacobs, I mean, last night watching that game, we're recording this on Tuesday morning, watching that game versus the Packers, every time I was looking at the TV, it was either Jacoby Myers catching a pass from Jimmy Garoppolo or Josh Jacobs getting the ball. The thing was, it was just Josh Jacobs running into a cloud of dust, and not in the good way that we say, like when players take off. It was just basically him running into a rugby scrum over and over and over. Mm-hmm. Jagger, you're lowest on Josh Jacobs. So, care to touch on that a little bit? Is it basically just more of what Dave is talking about?
Yeah, and exactly it. It's this Josh Jacobs is a good running back, but everyone forgets that he's carrying that Josh McDaniels baggage. And it's like you said, I don't know how much you can ask of him because we saw the beauty last year, and now this year I feel like I'm looking at the same John Gruden mess that I saw 2 years ago, where you can only be so good, but when everything in front of you is really bad, you can't expect that out of a running back. We've seen this with even arguably same tier or better running backs with like Saquon Barkley, where you can't ask him to part the Red Sea every carry. So to me, with running backs, it's very straightforward to me. If you're in a good offense, it's going to bring you up beyond a lot of your ability for me. And if you're in a bad offense, it's going to drag you down a lot, even if you're in a vacuum a good player.
And I'll eat my words a little bit what I said about him not being involved in the passing game. I misspoke. He's actually much more involved than I realized he was. I'm looking right now, more targets, more receptions, and more receiving yards per game than last year. So I guess that is the benefit of playing with Jimmy Garoppolo is you're going to get a little bit more check down work. I remember last year he saw that huge jump in passing down work. I didn't expect him to grow that this year, but yeah, looking at it, he certainly is. Also kind of wild that still 230 targets in his career and still has never caught a receiving touchdown.
It's so weird. It's so weird. The Raiders are just in general weird. I will say this. I will always stand by follow the volume, especially at the running back position. I think that we're eventually going to see a better Josh Jacobs. I don't know about a better Raiders, but at least a better Josh Jacobs. And right now, I do think that a lot of this has to do with just he is still getting, or I think last night he looked slightly better, but he is still getting his feet under. Remember, this is a guy that was not at training camp at all. We talked about how there would likely be a slow start into this season. We talked about this in the offseason, Dave. We were not necessarily drafting Josh Jacobs at where he was going, but at this point, the volume kind of has me tilting back towards Josh Jacobs in a positive way.
And I mean, call it a curse or correlation or a trend, whatever you want to call it, but he saw 400 opportunities last year, and any running back that sees that type of workload has not fared well the next year. I mean, we see this consistently, and we always say, it's a fluke, but it happens every single year, and Josh Jacobs saw that workload last year, and now he doesn't look like himself this year, so I don't know. Again, I don't know if it's a fluke or a trend or a curse or what it is, but it's something worth noting.
All right, let's get to our running back 11 here. It's weird to see this player's name getting mentioned so low, but I think so much of it has to do with the injuries, the team around him, and we just don't know what this future is going to look like. But Saquon Barkley is our running back 11 here in tier 3. Dave, you and I have him ranked as a running back 9. Jagger, what are we doing here, man? You've got him ranked as running back 17. I want to hear the reasoning. I understand being a little bit lower on Saquon because of all the concerns, but are there really 16 running backs that are going to have a better fantasy season than Saquon Barkley going forward?
Yes, and it's the Giants, man. It's a full fade to me. And I know when I was doing this, and I'm like, am I really doing this? Am I really doing this? Am I really doing it? And I just kept pushing him down. And like I said, maybe it's a little bit too much situation for me. But when it comes to these fantasy running backs, especially during redraft, situation is the only thing that really matters to me. And now we're seeing that Daniel Jones may be out here pretty soon. So what is this offense really going to look like? Is it going to go up from here now that Daniel Jones is out? It I don't really think that Tyrod Taylor's the answer. And we also haven't seen Tyrod Taylor make it through 2 games straight in about 10 years. So like even how long are they going to be able to rely on them? And I know that he's a good player, but to me, it's worse than what Jacobs is going through right now.
Dave, I want to ask this question because there's a bunch of Saquon Barkley fantasy managers out there that might be asking, no Daniel Jones and maybe Tyrod Taylor takes over, whatever it is. Could this actually mean that the Giants need to rely on Saquon more than ever? And he starts seeing the kind of volume that we're seeing from other guys. Is there at least like a little glimmer of hope here for Saquon Barkley managers?
Sure, but that doesn't make him all that different from Josh Jacobs, where he's running behind a bad offensive line on a bad offense. And if he's not finding his way into the end zone, he's giving you back end RB2, maybe even RB3 numbers. So I'm kind of aligned with Jagger here. I think RB17 is pretty low, but also when you start looking at all of these guys in this tier, like RB10 through RB17, it is all really, really flat here. So we're really splitting hairs trying to say, who is above this other guy. I think this is all kind of you just got to bite it, put it in your lineup every single week and hope for the best, but you're not really feeling good about any of the running backs in this tier.
Well, that's why people come to this show, so that they can not feel good about anything.
I mean, we're talking about running backs. I mean, really, once we got past the top 3, we could start pointing out the flaws and picking the warts on every single one of these guys. I mean, if you don't have Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, and Austin Ekeler, I don't know if you're feeling too good about any running backs this year. You just gotta take what they give you.
We should have just made this the shortest episode ever. These are the 3 running backs. They're really good. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Package up your Kenneth Walker, Saquon Barkley, and Josh Jacobs and try to get Christian McCaffrey.
There it is, folks. The best trade advice you'll hear all season. All right, let's move to running back 12. We've got DeAndre Swift, running back for the Philadelphia Eagles. Dave, you and I each have him as the running back 15 on the year. Jagger, back to you, man. You got him as running back 9, DeAndre Swift. I'll say this. Swift is better than most people think or most people believe. I think there's a lot of recency bias, whether it's been injuries or seeing Jamal Williams get the touchdowns last year, but DeAndre Swift has never finished lower than the PPR running back 17 in points per game. And currently, he's a running back 12. So we're just underneath that at running back 15. Jagger, you're just above that at running back 9. So why are you so high on DeAndre Swift?
I think a lot of people have the stink of the Deuce Staley Detroit Lions DeAndre Swift, or I guess the current Detroit Lions with Jahmyr Gibbs. But right now, especially if you think about where he's currently the RB12 in points per game, that is with a game where he had 1 point, like 1 PPR point, essentially. We've seen him improve in almost one particular stat every week. Now he's getting the stats. Yes, Kenneth Gainwell's coming in there and spelling him, but even now he is getting the receiving like we saw last week. They're starting to check down. I think he's starting to earn the trust of Jalen Hurts. Not only just that, again, it's the same thing I keep talking about. I want guys that are in good offenses. So if you look at a lot of the rushing stats, he's in that same category with David Montgomery, where he's pretty much okay. But the fact that he's on the Eagles and behind that offensive line is going to help a lot. He's going to get tons of carries, and now he's getting receiving work. Will he lose a lot of touchdowns to the brotherly shove? Probably, and I'll be frustrated and I'll cry with everyone else. But with the running back landscape, I want someone I can trust to at least get quality carries behind a good offensive line. I don't think there's anyone else I'd rather have around that range other than DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, I think of everybody in this tier, I think DeAndre Swift has the highest ceiling, and I think that he also has one of the easiest paths to hit that ceiling. But you can't ignore the risk. I mean, he's been injured a lot. We've never seen him handle a workload like this before. Kenneth Gainwell is going to be an annoying thorn in the side. Like you said, Jalen Hurts with the old brotherly shove here, sniping some touchdowns. So there's a lot of risk here, and it's tough to ignore that risk. But like I said, I think he's got the highest ceiling and the easiest path to hit that ceiling of all these running backs.
Mm-hmm.
I think no matter how we slice it, I think we can all agree DeAndre Swift and his average draft position of running back 25 was one of the best draft values, along with some of these other guys we'll talk about in just a minute. But I want to move on to running back 13 here. It's Derrick Henry of the Tennessee Titans. And it's weird, but I'm curious to see if we're reaching the point where we're getting to the end for Derrick Henry. I've got him at running back 11. Jagger, you're at running back 12. Now let's move on to our running back 13 here, and it's Derrick Henry of the Tennessee Titans. Jagger and we have him ranked a little bit higher. I'm at running back 11. Jagger, you're at running back 12. Dave, you've got him lowest at running back 16. I know the snaps have been a little inconsistent. We're seeing more Tajay Spears. Derrick Henry's the running back 15 so far in PPR. So your RB 16 rankings, not all that crazy. It's actually pretty spot on. So is this finally that age cliff that we've been hearing about for years and years? Is it finally happening for Derrick Henry?
Yeah, King Henry's reign might be coming to an end here. I was writing in my 3 up, 3 down article yesterday about Derrick Henry as a guy who is trending down. And the more I dug into it, the worse it looked. Obviously we know he's got the lowest yard per carry of his career. I think anybody who's been paying attention knows that, but he's also got the fewest yards after contact per attempt of his career. You start looking at some of the other advanced metrics. Broken tackle rate is the second lowest of his career, behind only the 2021 season that was cut short by injury. Also the second lowest rushing yard over expectation per attempt of his career, behind only that 2021 season as well. And then you look at it, Tajay Spears is just the better running back right now. He's getting 2 yards per carry more than Derrick Henry is on the same offense, behind the same offensive line. Started looking at some of the snap counts as well and the snap shares. Dating back to week 3 of 2020, Derrick Henry has only seen a sub 50% snap share once. He has already done that twice this year. He's on pace for the fewest touchdowns since 2018 when he was in a timeshare with Dion Lewis. He's on pace for the fewest touchdowns in a season since his rookie year. It's not looking good. It really looks like all of the years of heavy usage and the age is finally catching up to Derrick Henry. So I'm kind of looking at him as more of a middling RB1, or I'm sorry, a middling RB2 than the RB1 he's been for the last few years.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of this, too, was maybe something the Titans saw, which is why they went out and drafted Tajay Spears so early, and we just weren't really privy to that information because, as we know, with running backs, volume is king, and Derrick Henry was always getting that volume. Now the Titans not looking so great this year. Let's move on to our running back 14, and it's Alvin Kamara. I actually have him ranked at running back 14. Dave, you're highest at running back 11. Jagger, you're right in between at running back 13. Dave, I want to go back to preseason where you were lower on Alvin Kamara than I was. Now you're higher, but we both agreed that we thought that drafters were overreacting to the Alvin Kamara suspension. We saw it the previous year where everyone was overreacting to DeAndre Hopkins and his suspension. He played phenomenally. Now he's in a role here with the Saints and with Derek Carr where he is getting a lot of volume. He's getting a lot of targets. After just 2 games, he's already the running back 31 in PPR. He has scored 7 more points than Najee Harris, who has played 5 games. Yeah. Alvin Kamara right now, running back 6 in points per game. I know it's a small sample size, but what I do want to talk about here, Dave, you have him a little bit higher. So I want to kind of see both sides of this coin here. Do we think once Derek Carr and his shoulder heals up that maybe we're not seeing as many checkdowns and we do see a bit more Michael Thomas and Chris Olave? Or do we really believe here that Alvin Kamara should be a set it and forget it top 12 running back every week?
That's how I'm looking at Alvin Kamara. I mean, he's got 49 opportunities, or I'm sorry, 49 touches in the last 2 weeks. That's just crazy, averaging 24.5 touches per game. That leads the NFL. Obviously, we're looking at a 2-game sample size here, so that could come down a little bit, but he is the guy in this New Orleans Saints offense. And, some of my concerns were that Kendre Miller was going to carve out a much bigger role than we've seen so far. And maybe we chalk that up to the preseason injury, didn't have time to really ramp up. Maybe that grows as the season goes on. But also Jamal Williams, who's on IR right now. Before he hit IR, he looked terrible in this offense. So I was kind of looking in the preseason, there was going to be this 3-headed committee with Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller. And it's been anything but. It is just the Alvin Kamara show. So I'm not really too concerned here. I'm looking looking at Kamara as an RB1 for the rest of the season.
Let's get to our running back 15 here. It's James Cook, running back for the Buffalo Bills, and I'm lowest on him. I've got him at running back 17. As of right now, he's a running back 16 in total points, running back 19 points per game. Dave, Jagger, you guys have him a bit higher. Dave, you're at running back 12. Jagger, you are highest at running back 11. So I want to throw this to you since you're the high man here on James Cook. Convince me. Why should I be higher on him? I've got him at running back 17, and that's kind of about where he is in terms of points per game and total points. And I think there's a lot more questions than there are answers on James Cook. So convince me and the rest of the audience as to maybe why they should be buying into James Cook going into the rest of the season here.
James Cook has been the best running back in the Josh Allen era, and we haven't even seen him, to me, at his full ceiling yet. We're already seeing that he's getting used in the passing game. He's only scored 1 touchdown on the year against Miami, and I feel like out of all the carries and the touches he's getting, we still haven't seen him quite regress to the mean. So out of anyone, I think this is more about the upside, about being a running back that's in one of the best offenses in the NFL. I know I was a little bit worried when I first saw the Bills, but they've turned it around. I know that they didn't look good, but I think that was mainly because it was a London game and Jacksonville had an entire week there, and that's basically a home game for them. So I'm willing to put that in my back pocket and take it with a grain of salt. And then when you look at the rest of his schedule, it's pretty easy. You got the New York Giants, New England. Say what you want about their defense. Their offense is so bad that I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities. And you got Denver and the New York Giants. To me, out of anyone who's again, these running backs are in great offenses, he's arguably has a better chance of success than DeAndre Swift. He just has, to me, he's not behind as good of an offensive line as DeAndre Swift is. So that's why I have him a little bit behind there.
Yeah, before we move on, I do want to mention the Buffalo Bills have been losing some defensive stars. Matt Milano, their star linebacker, out for the rest of the season, if I'm not mistaken. That could change things up a bit for this Bills team. That they may not. Tre'Davious White, yep, with the Achilles. So you might start to see that this Buffalo Bills defense might start letting up a few more points than we typically see. You might get a James Cook uptick in that passing game. So there could be a bit more going on there. I do still think it's worth mentioning, and it's weird that we have to say this. Latavius Murray is kind of a thing there. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it's enough of a thing where it's annoying, as well as Damian Harris. So let's move on to our running back 16 here. And this is the most meh of all running backs right now. This is kind of like the Kirk Cousins of running backs. It's Joe Mixon. He's our running back 16. I've got him ranked at running back 16. Dave and Jagger, you guys have him at running back 14. 4 or 5 games between 10 to 14 PPR points for Joe Mixon. He has been nothing but consistent. It's just consistently not a good consistent. Yeah, like consistently average. That's what we see. And we know last year he was buoyed by a big multi-touchdown performance that got him like close to 59 points. Or something. Yeah, it was something ridiculous. And that kind of threw everything off. But guys, I do start to wonder, is this just more of what we're going to see with Joe Mixon? Or can you look at the flip side of this where the offense is getting better and this is how good Joe Mixon has been with a bad offense? So if it gets better, are there more scoring opportunities? Dave, I'll throw this to you first.
Yeah, I think we all might be a little bit too low on Joe Mixon. I mean, he's averaging almost 20 touches per game. We keep talking about how this Bengals offense is going to get better, and when the offense gets better, Joe Mixon is going to get better as well. He's only scored 1 touchdown on the year on all of this work as well, so in line for some positive regression there in the touchdown column. But the ceiling just isn't there, and I think that's why. I mean, he's a fine guy to plug into your RB2 spot, but he's not the guy that you really want to count on week in and week out as your number 1 running back.
Now, we're going to talk about 8 more running backs, okay? We're not done with these rankings here. We are going to get to number 24. We're talking about guys like Devon Etienne, and all the news there with him potentially missing 4 weeks. Aaron Jones, is he going to be coming back anytime soon? Kyron Williams, do you keep just riding the wave? How valuable are these running backs going forward? We're going to continue this conversation over on the audio version of this show. You can join us by simply clicking the link down below. You can check us out on any of your favorite podcast platforms, going over to Apple or Spotify, whichever one. We'll be right there for you. We're going to continue this conversation. We'll catch you on the other side. Adios.